All right, guys, a bit of a different video here today. I just wanted to highlight some of the most impactful vulnerabilities in the year 2020, tail end of 2020. And certainly that is coming along pretty similarly in 2021 as well, from what I've seen. I do keep an eye on the bug bounty space every now and again, and pretty much all of these are still really huge things. So even though this is slightly dated on this article, I think it really sheds light on, even if you have no interest in bug bounties whatsoever, like I'm not the biggest bug bounty guy either, to be honest with you. If you plan on working in the space as a pen tester, it's good to know this stuff because it helps you prioritize where you should be spending your time as well. Because you got to figure the bug bounty hunters that are finding these bounties, I mean, almost all the companies, they have some sort of security process. I mean, admittedly, probably a lot of them, especially the smaller companies, might not have very much security, very, very good security. But most of these companies, and I mean, don't get me wrong, people are finding bug bounties on big companies like your Fortune 500s all the time as well, that definitely have a lot of funding for their security. But keep in mind that before the bug bounty hunter can even find these vulnerabilities, it went through all of these security processes, right? Maybe they had some static code assessment, dynamic code assessment, automated vulnerability scanners running on the code, and they probably had a pen tester manually looking for vulnerabilities as well, and they missed it. All right, they missed it. That's the key part. And then later, the bug bounty hunter found the vulnerability, right? And so that is why that even if you're not interested in bug bounties, this video should be pretty helpful to you because these are the 10 most impactful ones, right? Number 1, cross-site scripting. This is one that has been around for a long time and is not going anywhere because there's so many potential vectors for this vulnerability, right? There, like anything that involves user input almost, if it's reflected on the page, if it's stored anywhere, if it's passed through the DOM, could result in a cross-site scripting vulnerability. So there's so many different places in the application where this could occur, and the developers have to be absolutely on point with making sure that they are properly sanitizing the data, only getting the proper characters in. There's so much validation that they have to perform everywhere in order to prevent this vulnerability. So that's why this is found so much, and it can be very dangerous. A lot of people just think, oh, cross-site scripting is just popping an alert box, right? No, it's a lot more than that. You can do pretty much anything JavaScript can do, and JavaScript's pretty robust. There's a reason that pretty much every developer nowadays is using JavaScript, right? It can do a lot. And so you can even get, sometimes I've seen pretty crazy exploits with this, like where you're able to get code execution even off of a cross-site scripting. This is a little bit more rare thing, but I have seen it before. You can certainly steal people's sessions, steal cookies in some cases if they're not protected properly. If you ever played around with the Beef exploitation framework, you'll see some cool JavaScript payloads there that you can use without having to know a ton of JavaScript. So next is improper access control. This is so difficult to find from automation because the automation needs to know a lot about a lot when it comes to the application to ever be able to detect this. It's basically only detectable by humans at this point in time. And so access control, basically what that is say like I'm logged in as a lower privileged account and I have access or somehow find a way to get access to a functionality in the application that only another higher level privileged user should have. Basically, if you think about privilege escalation, but within the context of the app usually is what we're talking about here, that is improper access control. So we're not properly restricting the resources. There's a way around it in some way, right? There's so many different ways that this can occur, right? And it's so difficult to actually automate testing for that only pen testers can find this. So that means as a pen tester, if you work in this field, you need to focus on getting really good at detecting improper access control vulnerabilities, because if you can't find it, then the only people that can are the malicious hackers, and hopefully, in the case of your company, one of these white hat hackers that will report it to a site like HackerOne and keep you guys safe. So you gotta do your job as a pen tester and get good at improper access control if you deal with web apps a lot, right? Because that's what we're talking about today. The next, information disclosure. This is a pretty big catch-all one. Anything that's disclosing information that might be sensitive or something they shouldn't be disclosing, right? This vulnerability can often result in, this is one that's normally chained with other vulnerabilities. Like say you were able to disclose like all the usernames on the system, and then you run like a brute force attack against them and you get access to the system or like SSH credentials or whatever it is, right? That's normally the impact. When this is really impactful, that's normally what it is. You're combining it with something else. Sometimes it's information disclosing like, hey, it's a vulnerable version of this that's running. A little bit more rare case, but yeah, something like that is sometimes possible. And server-side request forgery, there's a lot to this one as well. It can get pretty complicated, but basically you are actually leveraging a vulnerability on the web application to send a request to like another server, right? So to that other server, it looks like the request is coming from the web server, but when really you as the malicious attacker are able to send that request on the behalf of the vulnerable server. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. This article will allow you to read up on it a little more if that did sound confusing. But usually it depends on what the functionality of the application is, right? Say, very simple example. Let's just say that the web server has some network functionality where it has to, it uses FTP, like connects to some FTP server or something, right? And it shouldn't be accessible by the user. It's supposed to happen on the back end, but you find a way to actually get to the FTP request and actually request files arbitrarily from an FTP command through the web app, right? That would be like a server-side request forgery. The commonality with all these so far is there's so many different ways these can manifest. Another one is IDOR. This one is the most simple to understand. Basically, let's just say this website, HackerOne, instead of having the title of the article, let's just say it was like one, right? This was blog post. No, not one. Let's say this was blog post 550, right? Well, I could check, okay, what about blog post 551 and 552, right? And just keep changing the number and accessing things like, say this wasn't blog, say this was like user, right? And I'm accessing a user's account based off an ID, and I'm just changing the number by one and getting to someone else's account, and where like I clearly shouldn't be able to do that, right? I'm indirectly being able to reference that object. That's a very insecure way of them doing things. So that's what this is. Very simple. Privilege escalation is another pretty catch-all term. But yeah, it can be pretty similar to access control in some respects. Any of you guys that watch this channel probably know what privilege escalation is, right? You're able to escalate from a lower privilege account to a higher privilege account. This can also occur on a web app, right? It doesn't have to be once you get a shell, right? It can be on the web app itself, right? Say you're a regular user, but you find a way to add, privileges to your account to make it an admin account when you shouldn't be able to do that. That would be privilege escalation, right? And so there's so many different possible ways you can do that. That's the commonality with web apps, right? Because it's custom code written by developers. So the possibilities are endless for how you can exploit some of these. SQL injection is a little bit more straightforward, though. You have to have SQL and you have to have a database at play in order to leverage that. And the developers have to be pretty careless with their code nowadays. There's a lot of ways to make this pretty secure. SQL injection used to be a lot bigger than it was. It dropped down to 7, but it is very impactful. And this list is the top 10 most impactful, right? So obviously, if you can find a SQL injection, it's pretty rare nowadays, but if you can find it, yeah, it's extremely impactful. It's extremely serious. You can get code execution. You can download files, upload files. You can get all the user credentials, right? Their passwords, and sell them on the black market if you're a malicious person, right? Or use it to log into other people's accounts. Definitely don't do any of the things I'm mentioning. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what an attacker could do with that, right? And you talk about data breaches. You hear data breaches all the time, right? This is what a data breach is usually. They're able to get access to the database in some capacity. Maybe it's through SQL injection. Maybe it's through another vulnerability. Maybe it's through an RCE. But yeah, data breach. You get access to the data on the database, and this is one way you can do it. Very impactful vulnerability if you can find it. Improper authentication. You know, maybe they're using some JWT insecurely, right? You're using an algorithm that is weak, and you can easily crack it. So the authentication is not strong. You know, this could be a lot of things. Let's see what they say. Like it's pretty catch-all, right? They don't even really mention it any further. Yeah, improper authentication. I mean, definitely if they're trying to do their own custom auth, then yeah, that could be bad. If they're using basic auth as well, right? That's in clear text. You can brute force that easily. There's no lockout policy. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that this can manifest as well. And then code injection. Obviously, this is extremely serious. You can get code injection, execute code on the underlying server. Usually it's leveraging the programming language that the web app was written in. So for example, it's a PHP app. I'm leveraging the PHP language to run code on the system. So it's a little bit different than directly running code on the system because you're running code on the system through PHP in that scenario. But needless to say, very impactful if you can find it. And then cross-site request forgery. This is one of my strong ones. I'm finding this a lot nowadays. If they're not using a CSRF token, you have a post request, especially, this is what it's really dangerous for, is, you know, you can like chain this with other things, right? You can use it with cross-site scripting to where, say you have stored cross-site scripting, you can automatically direct someone to your malicious page and execute cross-site request forgery to, say, change their account to an admin role, right? And now you literally did cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and privilege escalation all in one. So yeah, this can be pretty dangerous. If you forge a post request that adds the admin flag to an account, then if you have an admin that's logged in, right, someone with permission to add privileges to an account, right, he's logged into the web app, let's say, and maybe use social engineering or something like that, or maybe cross-site scripting to get him to visit your malicious page while he has an active session, then it will automatically do the post request on his behalf to, say, add the admin flag to your account, and now you are suddenly admin level privilege. So those are some examples of how you can actually demonstrate an impact with this vulnerability. But yeah, all 10 of these, pretty impactful. And so if you can find this, if you're a bug bounty guy, you can make a lot of money off of looking for these things. But like I said, if you're not, look for this as a pen tester because this is what they're finding. So if you can find it first, you can provide a lot of value to your team because you really don't know, is a white hat hacker going to find this first? Is a black hat one going to and do something malicious? So yeah, provide value to your company, provide value, and keep everyone safe. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video and it was insightful for you. If so, then hit the like button, subscribe as well. And I will see you guys over in what you need to know for OSCP. If you want to get into some of this content, I cover some of the web app side as well on there, I do believe. I'm definitely working on pumping out more content for that as well as time goes on. So I'll see you guys right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.